Now, Washington Mornings on the Mall. 105.9 and AM 630. WMAL.
737 on WMAL. This is where Washington comes to talk. Coming up at 8:05, Shannon Bream. She's the Fox News legal analyst. We're going to have a whole rundown on yesterday's and today's proceedings in front of the Supreme Court and same-sex marriage. I'm Larry O'Connor. And Tori Clark is here.
I think about it for a split second.
I almost called you KT McFarland because KT McFarland is on.
It would be an honor to be mistaken for KT McFarland.
Exactly.
An honor.
I would love it as well. KT, the one and only KT McFarland, how are you this morning?
Well, feeling pretty good with all those compliments.
There you go.
Tori, it's great to be on with you.
Oh, it's nice to hear your voice again.
KT, can you give us your impression of how the president did in Israel? I'm getting mixed reports from various sides of the equation. Was it a successful trip for him as a president, and also was it, even more importantly, was it successful for the United States government?
Well, the proof will be in the pudding. You won't know yet. I mean, it's sort of an incomplete. I think as far as it went, it was pretty successful, and the way I've tried to describe it is it's sort of three colors, right? I think he got a green light, gave Netanyahu a green light. You know, you got to do whatever you got to do. We'll give you the weapons to do it. Do what you need to do. We agree that it's probably a year away, but don't expect us to be there with you shoulder to shoulder. We got your back, but we're not going to be there shoulder to shoulder. And I think he did draw the red line with Syria. And then I think he put the white flag up for the Palestinians. They're not going to negotiate or even try to do an Israeli-Palestinian deal at this point because there are a lot of more pressing problems, immediate problems in the Middle East.
Well, and ultimately, isn't that a win for Benjamin Netanyahu and Israel? Because as long as he doesn't get pressure from the president to accept or move toward Palestinian statehood, Netanyahu sort of has a free wild card there, doesn't he?
Yeah, I mean, but at this point, it's a back burner issue. The most important issue that either of those two guys, Netanyahu or Obama, are going to deal with in their presidencies is Iran. How do you know, everybody now agrees that it is going to happen while they're both in office. It's going to happen within the next 4 years, 3 years, 2 years, probably within the next 18 months. And how they deal with that is going to be the defining issue of their presidencies, or their, presidency, prime ministership. Do you let Iran get the bomb? Do you bomb Iran, risk a a regional war over what Iran is going to do next, or is there some alternative way? I mean, I've always faulted both of them for not finding a third way. Bombing Iran and letting Iran get the bomb. Everybody has known for a decade that we were going to come up to that choice, and we need to find another way. I'm not sure there's enough time to find another way, but I would try to buy time, buy a year, buy 18 months, buy another series of cyber attacks, and then use that period of time to go on a Manhattan Project accelerated program to develop American energy supplies. Because once America's independent in energy, oil, natural gas, who cares about the Middle East? You don't have to be in the middle of every one of their squabbles. I mean, that's a part of the world that has been fighting with each other since the book of Genesis. Why do we think by getting in the middle of their fights we're going to make anything better? And I think if you did American energy independence, you started now, you could be there within 3 to 5 years. And then the United States is an energy exporter. And then how does that change the dynamic of the world? China isn't going to pick a fight with us if we could be a potential source of energy for them. The Middle East doesn't figure as importantly in everybody's calculations. And by the way, as a sort of extra free gift with purchase, Russia, dependent upon its oil and natural gas exports, they're broke if the price of these resources goes down, which I think it inevitably would.
I think KT should rule the world. Very smart.
There you go.
Okay, KT, I've got a question for you. Is it just me, or is the national media, the conventional media, whatever we call them now, not focused on these incredibly important issues? I kind of look across the panoply of the national security issues and go, oh, my God, there are so many things that we really need to deal with in a very upfront fashion, but it's relegated to the backs of newspapers, to the bottoms of websites. I just don't think it's getting the focus and the scrutiny that it deserves.
Yeah, well, it bleeds, it leads. I think that 20 years from now we're going to look back, and one of the biggest stories, one of the biggest things that will have historians scratching their heads is not, Obamacare or DOMA or these sorts of issues. It'll be, where was the national media? There were so many of them, between blogs and television and radio and print. But what were they talking about? They were sort of frittering away. I mean, fiddling while Rome burns. I think that will be the big issue. Why were they not Why did they fail to bring a critical eye to the Obama presidency? And why did they not focus on the important issues immediately in front of their faces?
Yeah.
I agree completely.
And one of those issues, if we can swing over to Asia now, to me, it continues to be these threats from North Korea. It's almost like every week they're ratcheting things up more and more. And I feel like I've asked you the same question, but I need you to continue to sort of set me at ease. Is this just posturing so that they can force America to the table to negotiate and loosen up the sanctions, or are we really under some sort of military threat from North Korea at this point, or even worse, that their weapons are going to find their way into Iran's hands?
Well, look, this is a guy who shouldn't even be allowed to play with matches, much less nuclear weapons. You can really almost put it on your calendar. Every spring, the North Koreans just rattle a bunch of sabers. Why? Because they're usually running out of food at this point. Their winter harvest, they haven't had enough food to carry them through the winter and the spring. The summer harvest isn't in yet, and so they rattle their cages a little bit, and they hope somebody feeds them for the next couple of months. The problem with North Korea now, I think, is, well, they're on the verge of nuclear weapons, so much for that red line. But the Chinese, who we always figured in the end of the day could rein them in, the Chinese, because the Chinese give them something like 75-80% of their food, fuel oil, and transportation fuels, I think the Chinese have been really content for years to have the Korean Peninsula be at a boiling point. In other words, it would keep the U.S. off balance, the Japanese off balance, the South Koreans off balance. And now the problem is it's now going to boil over. And that the Chinese don't want. Why? Because then North Korea is going to be so scary that the South Koreans and the Japanese are going to either rearm, in the case of Japan, or potentially even go nuclear in the case of both of them.
Yeah.
That's exactly what China doesn't want. But yet, on the other hand, it's now gotten to the point where it may be too far, because if North Korea implodes or falls apart, what happens? There are going to be millions of North Korean refugees running north into China, which already has a problem with too many people and not enough jobs at this immediate point. And they're going to run south into South Korea, potentially unifying Korea into a strong neighbor on China's border. So I think the Chinese are they've kind of outsmarted themselves, and they may be in a little bit of trouble with this. Now, what is it for us?
Oh, you know what? We're going to have to hold it there, unfortunately, KT, because we're already out of time. But you know what? When we get you back, we'll ask you, what does it mean to us?
Not good.
This is going to be a great tease. It's a cliffhanger, a week-long
Thanks,
cliffhanger.